Welcome to Buildings and Beyond,
the podcast that explores how we can create a more sustainable built environment
by focusing on efficiency, accessibility, and health.
Hello, I'm Dylan Martello. This episode, we are discussing the topic of healthy buildings. On this episode, we have Sarah Nugent from Stephen Winter Associates guest hosting. Sarah is a sustainability director on SWA's Sustainable Building Services team, and in her day-to-day work, Sarah consults on high-performance sustainable commercial projects and has extensive experience in LEED, WELL, and the FitWell standards, all of which feature health as a primary focus. Sarah spoke with Jonsara Ruth. Jonsara is a co-founder and design director of the Healthy Materials Lab at Parsons School of Design in New York City. She is also the founding director of the Progressive MFA Interior Design program at Parsons. And in addition to that, she is a designer and artist of her own and has her own design collective called Salty Labs, where she puts her ideas to practice. In this episode, Sarah and Jonsara talk about what does it actually mean for a building to be healthy? Where are the common pain points regarding health and wellness in buildings? What building materials can harm human health, or rather, are there building materials or systems that actually enhance human health? It's an incredibly informative episode, and without further ado, please enjoy.
Just to start off, when you're talking about health and healthy buildings, what do you think is a healthy building, and what goes into that on your end?
Mm-hmm. You know, at the Healthy Materials Lab, we have a strong and passionate team, and so when we talk about the word health, we think about like what is a healthier building, mm-hmm. What is a truly healthy building, and what is the healthiest, that there are these, grades of healthy. So a healthier building means that it does not negatively impact the health of the people living inside, and that's, that's kind of bottom line. Like, let's make buildings that don't negatively impact people's health.
Right.
A truly healthy building does a lot more than that. In our mind, that means that the materials that are used to make that building during their life cycle also don't have a negative impact on human health or all living beings' health or on the ecologies that surround it. So we look at it. We look at materials throughout their life cycle.
Right.
We trace from the raw material extraction, transportation to a production site, transportation to a processing site, maybe into a production site, and then eventually into a building material that's transported to either a distributor or a building site itself. And throughout that life cycle, how does that material impact people, all living species, water systems, soil systems, and of course our atmosphere, the greenhouse gas emissions. So if we say like what's a truly healthy building, mm-hmm. that would be like materials that don't impact in the in-use phase, but also don't leave like negative impacts or traces throughout that life cycle, and then through to its disposal or recyclability or biodegradable.
Okay.
And then I would say like one more thing, Sarah.
Yeah, please.
Even though I'm just expanding on this a bit.
Please,
which is,
yeah.
What we look forward to is the healthiest materials. And, these are few and far between, but those that not only do everything right in terms of its life cycle, but also that when it's installed, it makes, it performs as a filter, or it performs to make the indoor air even better.
Right.
That it actually absorbs carbon from the atmosphere while it's there. It contributes to healthier indoor air.
There's budgets that people have to keep in mind and scopes that people have to keep in mind when they're constructing or renovating. And, a question I'll be posing to you later is if you only had 3 materials that you could, improve, or what are like the main 3 materials that you always advise folks optimize, if you have a limited budget or scope, or if you could do everything pie in the sky, which is kind of what I'm feeling like the last tier is, like the healthiest kind of regenerative materials, pie in the sky,
right?
Where budget's not a cost, if you could do everything, of course, right? Like, yeah. So it is a spectrum, right? Of you want to do the least harm and then do the most good that you can, but strike that chord or strike that balance of the triple bottom line, right? To make sure that all of those aspects are kept in mind.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
really
Like
fascinating, right?
What can you do right now, like
Yes.
today or tomorrow, and what do we aspire to do in the future?
Right. And so I guess for that, to that point regarding the what should you do right now, just the state of the built environment in general, I think we've come a long way. I think one thing born out of the pandemic is there's a little bit of increased knowledge across folks that aren't in the building industry in terms of what health really means and what aspects, again, like what's that minimum floor that you should have in every building. But a lot of folks don't have control over where they work and live, right? They don't have control over the filters. If you're getting any outdoor air and you're built, right? Like a lot of residential projects don't have ventilation. What do you think would need to change from, say, our business as usual? And I guess, again, there's kind of these two aspects. If you have control of the construction or if you're an occupant.
So the first option, I mean, obviously, like you just said, the first step is just the awareness that this is an issue. And building that awareness is something we think about all the time. Like
All the time, right.
Just have to bring everybody up to speed with the science.
Yes.
We talk about it all the time that designers and architects have a lot on their plate. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of responsibility to make sure
build a building that won't fall down, right?
Exactly.
Like that's the first part. Yes.
Don't kill anybody with your building.
Don't kill anyone. Yes.
Yeah. And keep the water out. Keep the energy efficiency high.
Yes.
So there's a lot of responsibilities that we have. So it's an added responsibility to say, and the health of the occupants depend on the kinds of materials that you choose. So that awareness, I think you're right. I think that during the pandemic, when people were spending a lot of time inside, or like in their own homes, people started to become more aware of what's around them.
Yes.
Weirdly, we
Right.
always do. There's that crazy statistic that is fundamental, which is we're the first generation to spend 90% of our time indoors.
And during pandemic, it obviously was much higher.
Exactly.
Right? You just never left your apartment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're more aware of what's around us, what are we breathing, what makes us happier. I think a lot of people did renovations.
Yeah.
So there's just more awareness, but I think there's a lot who aren't aware because there's just so many other factors to going to build a building. So the first thing is know what's in your materials. Know that the material, first, I think very first step is know that materials impact your health in the same way that food impacts your health. Or there's the, UN social determinants of health. There's a lot of determinants that impact our physical and mental well-being. But materials of buildings are one of them.
Right. Yes.
So as soon as we have that awareness, then we can start to say, well, let's find out what the ingredients are inside that are toxic and eliminate them. I think that's kind of the next step. But then that means that we need to know what those ingredients are. So which brings us to material transparency and this kind of advocacy that designers and architects can step into, which is just asking vendors, asking fabricators, asking manufacturers is the word I meant to say. Asking manufacturers what's inside the material that I want to use in this building. And just that act of saying what's in it is a huge advocacy for just this movement towards transparency, movement towards advocating for all materials manufacturers to declare what's inside the materials that we're building. In the same way that nutrition labels on food have to say this is what's inside.
Yes.
So we often just make that correlation. If we know that food impacts our life or our health, and we can look at those ingredients, then let's also just know that materials impact our health and look at those ingredients. And then we can start to choose healthier materials. And then the final piece is, not the final, but one of the main pieces is, and then let's make those materials also affordable.
Also educating, again, the designers on what they're specifying and what goes into them, but then also the owners, right, that are ultimately building the building, and underscoring the need for healthy materials just as much as insulation, or just as much as, the window to wall ratio, right? Like those things that go into an efficient building, underscoring the need for healthy materials just as much. And I'm sure that you've seen this is the work that you do, the past 5 or so years, a huge uptick in the amount of materials that have disclosures.
Yes.
It's really been just a skyrocketing, right? Just this precipitous increase that we found. Again, we do lead projects, well projects, fit well projects for new construction projects. That's my background, commercial. And
Great.
And when LEED version 4 came out, we didn't really know about the disclosures, right? It was this brand new thing. We weren't certain about it. So we weren't really advising projects to pursue it because we just didn't know, right? We just didn't know enough information. And what we found in that 5-year look back is almost every manufacturer is providing these disclosures. Again, like environmental product declarations, health product declarations, the declare labeling, cradle to cradle, like all of those things, right, are what we take into account. And so that I find very heartening, right, and very positive in terms of the information available so that folks, designers and owners can make those informed decisions. I'm sure that you've seen the same thing and that feeds into the work that your lab does, right, at gathering all of that and making it publicly available.
Yeah, exactly. We work closely with the Health Product Declaration Collaborative. We're funded by the same source of funding, actually the same project.
Wow.
And the project is called the Healthy Affordable Materials Project. And so we're all working on this kind of same goal, which is to make healthy materials affordable, and especially to be used, the big audacious goal is to transform affordable housing to be healthy.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons, so that healthier materials are affordable, but also so that people who don't have the privilege of choosing what's inside their homes can have a healthy home.
Right.
And, we advocate for people at those lower incomes who rely on social housing or subsidized housing to have the healthiest home. Because if they can, then anybody can.
Yes.
Anyway, so we work closely with the Health Product Declaration Collaborative, which, HPDs produces HPDs, and, now, their versions are just getting better and better, and I'm sure you're very familiar with them, because now they're reporting, okay, first it was, what are the ingredients in a material?
Right, like what just are there? I guess just for the audience, let's just walk through it, right? Just what is in there, right? What's in the product itself, and then to optimize, right? To go above and beyond in terms of the amount of materials that are disclosed, right? That's the next step.
Yeah, and then to identify if there's any hazards or potential harmful ingredients in a material, and can this be linked to some kind of health harm? And that's the next step. That's the next version. But when they negotiated to have this disclosure as part of LEED 4, that was a huge step. It's great to hear you say that was the turning point for you. That's really important information.
Yeah.
Because, certifications, these kind of agendas that builders have or owners have to have a certified building to show that, yes, we're reaching these sustainability criteria is definitely a driver for a lot of these things. Sometimes it's a very personal decision of owners, like they find out about this stuff and they're like, I don't want it for my family. I'm not going to do it for my work. Right. And sometimes it comes through certification. Like, I want to achieve this certification, and therefore I will look for materials transparency.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm thinking a lot about Robin Gunther, who's a thought leader in this area, for decades, from Perkins and Will. She was a great mentor for me. And, she likened looking at material ingredients to like Michael Pollan's food rules.
Okay.
And I think she and Tom Lent put together like the material rules, which are very similar. Like, if it has this long list of ingredients, get skeptical. If you can't pronounce it, you might not want to use it. Like those same kind of very common sense rules. And it does apply.
Yeah, of course, right? Because the natural materials, the naturally derived products are likely going to be the healthier ones, right? Than inherently non-emitting or inherently non-toxic, right? That's really fascinating. Anything else that you recall from her material rules?
Yeah, I'd have to look them up again, but it's very simple.
Right.
Yeah, it's
trying to not
common sense. Like, ask what's inside. like just like you would if it, the more natural it is, the less processed it is, the more you want it.
Yeah, we'll have to link. We'll link it in the notes.
Yeah, that would be great.
No, that's and to honor her memory.
Yeah, she's really changed the healthcare industry in a huge way with her work, and in addition to all of it, I remember her saying like she had her own body burden test done. Where you can test your blood for chemicals.
Wow. Okay, and like particulates or thing. Okay, got it.
Mostly the chemicals, and it was when she did it early, I think in the 2000s or maybe late 2000s. It was really hard to do, and it was really expensive, and it was top secret. And I'm not sure if it's not quite as difficult, but she said, my blood has a lot of similarity to the ingredients of industrial carpet.
Wow.
And so I invited her to come and speak at Parsons, and she showed this slide of all the ingredients that are used in carpet, industrial carpet, and she said, and then she highlighted all those ingredients that showed up in her own blood.
Oh my goodness!
Test.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like these things are making their way into our
your
bodies.
Body. Well, right, and all of the information about microplastics, right, being in our bloodstream because they break down in the environment, and then you drink it, right, or you eat food that. I mean, it just again, it's the circular thinking about the circularity of the product is something that folks. Again, I think until past 5 years, hadn't really been thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that microplastics example is a really good one because we hear about microplastics all the time in the ocean, and it feels like, all those water bottles. But actually, that new report that came out, I don't know if you saw this like a year ago, that said they examined the microplastics in the ocean and found that over 50% of them come from paint.
Wow.
And just about 50%, I think, is from architectural paint, which means it's on us.
It's on us.
As designers and architects, we can use paints that don't have synthetics.
Yes.
Yeah, we can use non-plastic paint. There's there's centuries of history to prove it. And then there's a lot of new great products out there that are not plastic-based. So microplastics in the ocean, they get inside of us, then our ingredients inside of us, like mirror plastics. We can avoid a lot of that just by changing our paint.
Changing just that one product, right? I mean, so would that be your one to change?
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay. Is number one paint?
It's easy.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
easy. Yes.
Yeah. And what we do at Healthy Materials Lab is we are funded by philanthropy so that we can offer free resources. We do the research to say, here's a selection of examples of bio-based paint, mineral paint. In the minerals, there's several kinds of minerals. There's clay, there's lime, there's potassium silicate. In the bio-based, there's linseed oil, there's cellulose-based paint. The soy, like there's different kinds of bio-based and mineral-based paints that have been tried and true. Especially, of course, in the Scandinavian countries, and in Germany, they're ahead of us on a lot of this, and so, but which is great because they've tested it. They've tested the viability and the performance, and they're now becoming available in the States just in the last couple of years, which is super exciting.
That is super exciting. Wow. Yeah, and again, we work on typically, commercial projects, higher education, but also K through 12 hospitals, where you have more sensitive groups, but just thinking about that holistically, or all of the different people that use buildings, you're going to have sensitive groups in all types of buildings,
everywhere,
everywhere. So, all that's to say, commonly specified every building has paint.
Yeah,
you gotta have paint.
And it's on typically, not always, but often it's on 5 surfaces in our little rooms. It's, ceiling, walls, it's a lot of the surface area. And so if we follow the science and say what we're exposed to over the course of our life impacts our health more than genetics. And that's the exposome research that's happening, headed by some folks at Mount Sinai. But to say we used
genetics.
We used to attribute all these cancers and big, scary diseases to genetics. But actually, genetics in this science makes up 10% of disease, and the rest is exposure and lifestyle. So if we think that what we're exposed to,
Right.
if we're in our home office or if we're, in our schools or if we're in our workplaces or in the hospital, it's like, what's the surface area? It's
Exactly.
paint.
Literally
Paint is like
surrounded by it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
I mean,
wow.
the other is flooring, of course,
Yes, right.
which is another one, but also an easy change. But, yeah, I say paint and flooring.
Paint and flooring. Okay. Because those are what you experience as an occupant, right? That's like the first layer. So would
Yeah.
you say that finishes should be given paramount focus versus kind of the other architectural materials like gypsum or insulation because of that? Because we can literally touch it, right? Like we can actually interact with those materials.
Yeah, I mean, gypsum and insulation are also very important because the dust from both of those products
Yes.
gets into our spaces, and you know
Yes,
that
right.
from the particulates of course, and can have trace
Oh, yeah, right.
toxics all over. But
Yes.
if we think about surface area and the final, it's always interesting just to think about a wall section.
Yes.
But the innermost layer is that paint, which is, I don't know, so interesting. I don't know.
Yes.
We thought, well, let's focus on paint for a year, and then the next year we'll focus on another material. And we've been focused on paint for 6 or 7 years, or 8. It's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Right. But, I'm sure it's opened up and then you open one door and then you learn something new and then it opens another door and then 6 years go by.
Well, also because, we use paint as, in design, we use paint as a vapor barrier.
Yes,
As the
right.
final, on the exterior walls.
Yeah.
Which means that vapor and air cannot come inside from outside. Mm-hmm. But what happens is that vapor or that moisture gets trapped right behind the paint.
Yes.
And then can grow mold and all kinds of things. Likewise, everything that's on our interior air
Yep.
gets trapped inside. And we know also now that the indoor air can be 3 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. So if we're trapping our air inside with this kind of plastic wrap of paint, and we're trapping ourselves into super polluted indoor air.
Right. Right.
If we think about this whole thing differently and we say an exchange of the outdoor and indoor air is valuable to health, to thermal insulation, to the kind of performance of a building so that moisture does not get trapped in the wall, we think about this thing totally differently.
Right. Wow.
Then we need vapor permeable paint, which is like mineral paint.
Okay.
It's fabulous. And it's now, it used to be that mineral paint, centuries and centuries and centuries ago, mineral paint was basically limestone that had been cooked, changes its molecular structure, becomes quicklime or calcium carbonate, gets mixed with water and, painted on buildings, but it comes off,
Okay.
and I think that's generally why it went out of fashion, because it kind of comes off. If you go to the center of Rome, for example, and you see after a rainy day, you sometimes see the pigment at the edge of the building where the building meets the street, because it kind of washes off. But now with new technologies and new understanding about this, a lot of those mineral paints are made to be super durable, scrubbable even.
Wow.
We don't have those same issues. Yes, they're adding small percentages of binders that keep them, keep those pigments in that paint held against the wall. But they're so much better for all of us in all ways and throughout that life cycle.
Again, going back to, if you had to focus on specific materials to prevent or specific materials to optimize in a product, are there any others that are really, typically commonly specified that you would say, kind of your top 5 that should be optimized for health? Or again, or, in terms of carbon, human health, or equity, the different facets that you guys include in your lab?
Yeah. We talk about vinyl a lot as one of a top ingredient to eliminate.
Yeah.
To really just not include in any project because it has a very high carbon footprint.
Yes.
Embodied carbon, again.
Yes,
if we calculate the embodied carbon, it has a very high cost to health across its life cycle. And, we know just even from this, the recent train disaster in Ohio.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm.
That was carrying vinyl chloride for the production of vinyl.
Yes.
So it's affecting all of us in all different ways. And actually, Robin Goodther was a big champion of eliminating vinyl from healthcare.
Okay.
This is a carcinogen. Why are we putting it in a cancer center?
Like, why? Right. Yes. But it's, again, people don't know, right? People aren't putting the pieces together. Or,
exactly. Mm-hmm. And so flooring, for example, has a lot of PVC. There's a lot of luxury vinyl tile. There's a lot of luxury vinyl now. It's so funny. Great marketing term, luxury.
Yes.
And vinyl is used in all parts. It's used in pieces of the backing of carpet, for example, or a lot of interior products, especially commercial projects, include vinyl, including plumbing, piping, those kinds of things.
But like secondary, tertiary products include secondary, tertiary materials in products will contain vinyl. Yeah.
Exactly, because we think about a product, a building product, it's not one material.
Never.
It's usually a list of many things that are kind of like sandwiched together to make that performance value. And then we have to look at the ingredients of each one of those layers in a way.
This web, right? Just webs out. Yeah.
The other way we think about it is, what are the chemical classes and, that we could avoid, for example. And our other colleagues, Green Science Policy Institute, has done a lot of work in that to say, there's 86,000 chemicals or more that are produced in the United States. Very few of them are regulated.
Right.
Oh, so
it's very few. Right.
What if we just put those into classes? And so they've categorized as 6 classes plus formaldehyde and say, why don't we just try eliminating a class of chemicals?
Okay. Just one of those 6.
Yeah. We celebrate every step here.
Of course. Right.
Eliminate PVC, vinyl. Eliminate flame retardant chemicals if you can.
Right. Right.
Eliminate formaldehyde from wood products. These kinds of things. The formaldehyde piece has also become much easier than it was 15 years ago.
It's wild, right? It's wild how far that's come to. Yes.
So, that's another strategy.
Focus on the class and see if you can prevent it. And again, aspirations, right? It's okay if some products you just can't get, right? You maybe can't get a replacement, right? But be thoughtful about what you're specifying and try to do your best to remove, aspirationally one of those 6 classes. I think that's an excellent thing that we could come out of today, right? Try and find one class that you can remove or review your specs. And where is there a PVC material that you can remove, right? Where's something that you can replace? Yeah.
The PFAS chemicals have gotten a lot of attention recently in the last couple of years, which is so great because now, it's horrible because now it's found in so much drinking water around the country.
Right.
And it comes from the production of these chemicals that are ubiquitous. So if we can say, let's not specify materials that have perfluorinated chemicals or PFAS chemicals, we would be so much better. In fact, the Healthy Building Network just put out a white paper, I think, that talked about paint. A lot of paints now have PFAS.
Wow.
PFAS is found in paint. Another reason not to use plastic-based paints, acrylic, latex. Yeah. So we can say that's a class of chemicals. Do we really need that quality of stain repellency on everything? Do we really need a stone sealer? If we can specify a granite countertop, for example, that doesn't need a stone sealer, better.
Right.
Or porcelain, large format porcelain slabs now we have. Great. Doesn't need a PFAS stone sealer. So let's just eliminate that.
Right. And PFAS, again, for the folks that might not be as familiar, is the forever chemical that's now found in drinking water. It's not really regulated by the EPA. There is some discussions and submissions to them to regulate it. But I had read that there was some they were lagging, right, on whether or not PFAS should be regulated and banned. That's been within like the past 6 months, right? Jonsara?
Yeah, but it's on their radar, which is
yes, it's
amazing.
on their radar, right?
Yeah.
But if there's, what did you say, 60,000 different types of chemicals that are manufactured in America, and I think it's only
almost
like
100,000.
100,000, and I think only like 150 are banned from the EPA. And of course, that goes into like PCBs and lead and all of those, asbestos. All of those are banned. But there are all these other chemicals which pose human harm, which are not yet banned. It is great to see that they're thinking about banning it. But
exactly. I mean, I think, we've just recently, just in the last couple weeks, there are communities that are trying to pass these bans, like in Minnesota.
Wow.
They're passing a comprehensive PFAS ban.
in Minnesota. Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So there are these bans that are starting to happen. And it's promising.
Yes.
Actually, other countries are, much more strict than we are before we are. But it's promising that our country is actually, getting on the bandwagon and realizing how harmful it actually is.
Right, because it's an endocrine disruptor. It has all of these really horrific attributes, PFAS in general.
Yeah. And endocrine disruption, just to it's so funny, right? Like as designers and architects and builders, we now have to know a little bit about policy. We have to know a lot about chemistry, what is about health? Like, what is an endocrine disruptor again? Like that, those are the hormones in us that regulate our reproductive health, for example, or thyroid function, and if that goes berserk, there's obesity that's related to PFAS exposure. There's, infertility
Correct.
that's related
Yes.
to PFAS exposure. So, these are things that, once you start knowing a little bit about it, and there's more information now that is pretty easy to understand. You realize how important it is to avoid.
Just avoid.
Yeah.
Just avoid it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not to mention it, like you said, it's a forever chemical that stays in our environment forever.
Forever. Right.
Arlene Bloomoy says, do you really need it? Like before you specify it, ask yourself, do I really need this?
Yes.
Or is there an alternative that will be just fine?
Well, it's interesting also that you said that a lot of the materials that have it doesn't seem like it's integral to their function. It seems like it's more of a kind of cherry on top in terms of like the durability of that product, because you're saying, right, it was like a sealer for different stones. So the stone will still exist without that coating, right? It'll still function its function.
Right. It might have a stain, like if you use a marble, for example. It
does get
But, if we think of the beautiful pizzerias in Italy that are made of marble that have no sealer on them, yeah, they've been there for, there's this great pizzeria in Rome that I love to go to that's stained with the pizza sauce and grease forever. It looks beautiful. People go to efforts to make it look as beautiful as that.
Yeah.
So it's also our expectation. We have this
Yes.
cleanliness
Yes.
or perfect, just as new expectation.
Yes.
We don't want materials to ever look like they aged. And maybe this is our problem as a society. We don't want anything to age. It needs to look new
Yeah.
all the time. But what if we change our expectation? With age, it's going to change and get interesting and different, and we just embrace that.
Well, you embrace patina on metal materials. We all think patina is gorgeous, right? So why? I would equate it in that way, right? Why? Yeah. maybe it's not called patina with marble staining, but maybe we can coin a term.
I think we need to, just like they did with luxury vinyl.
There you go. Branding, rebrand it. Yeah.
Yeah, the patina of countertops. the luxury patina of countertops.
I mean, a marble tomato sauce filled pizza parlor sounds pretty luxurious to me.
Delicious even.
Well, in our last few minutes, this has been a really fascinating conversation, Jonsara, so I really appreciate it. So again, we were talking about kind of those top areas that should be focused on. I think we've reviewed them. If there's any other materials that you are really intrigued by in the research you've been doing lately, or others that you think, again, for affordable housing that you advise be mainly focused on? We can focus on those now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've talked a little bit, we touched a little bit on insulation. Which is there's a lot of really interesting alternative insulations that we can use so that we don't have to rely on, expanded polystyrene.
Right. Yes.
So we do rely on expanded polystyrene, which is, again, made of plastics. It's made of petrochemicals. And because it's made of petrochemicals, which is oil, it's highly flammable, which means it's impregnated with harmful flame retardant chemicals. So there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, it's great for thermal insulation, but there's a lot of reasons why we should avoid it.
Yes.
And so there's a lot, and so the industry has, the kind of healthier materials industry has come up with, kudos to a lot of these manufacturers, alternatives that are really pretty good, and so some of those are like cork is an incredible, again, if we talk about healthiest, then that would be a material that's not only healthy, carbon sequestering, but it's also regenerative. It's quickly regenerative, and cork is one of those, superstar materials because it comes from the bark of a cork tree, which then grows back.
Just grows back. You're not chopping the tree down. Right. Yep.
Yeah, and the tree absorbs carbon from the atmosphere, and the exposure to cork does not cause any health harm. And so there's a lot of great. So anyway, so there's some great thermal insulations made of cork, 100% cork, which is awesome.
And
There's
so would
also
those
some,
be used, I'm sorry, would those be used in lieu of a specific type of insulation, like rigid insulation cork would be used in lieu of that?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
So yeah, board insulation.
Board insulation. Okay, great.
Yeah. There's also some great products that are made out of other kinds of wood, like wood cellulose that are bound with paraffin wax to make a board. Wow. There's a company out of Germany called Gutex that makes it, but now there's a company in Maine it's almost has their product on the market, I think.
And again, that's a insulation alternative, wood cellulose bound with wax as a replacement for board insulation.
Yeah, exactly. The majority of the percentage is cellulose, wood cellulose in that product. So if we look at the ingredients list, again, it's pretty simple ingredients, short ingredients list. And, the binder is pretty benign also. Mineral wool as a board or even as a bat has become really common.
What's your opinion about mineral wool?
Well, I mean, the great thing is that it's better than plastic.
Yes.
And there are problems. There's formaldehyde that's being used in the making of it, which is problematic. So we have to weigh the consequences of this. But it's available and it's cost competitive. And I mean, it's more expensive than XPS. But what's your feeling about mineral wool?
Well, we try and do similar with how you, when we're talking about kind of good, better, best, we try and specify the products that tick every box, have a low embodied carbon footprint, have HBDs, are non-emitting, and, have EPDs, right? So we've certainly, and have recycled content and are manufactured locally, right? So we try and take all of those into account. And so because of that, we have been able to find, again, it's going to be based off, right, if it's rigid or if it's, something like mineral wool. But we're really trying to avoid the XPS products just generally. And yes, we know that there are better manufacturers that use, more eco-friendly blowing agents and all that stuff when they create the product. But I would say, mineral wool we haven't necessarily seen as something that can't tick all those boxes. But we have to be, again, proactive and thoughtful about making sure that they're all compliant. And that's the work that we do, right? We're making sure to have it be optimized and synergistic across these different categories. Kind of, again, make sure that it meets all of the criteria in that kind of upper tier product option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. And the good, better, best is really just another really great strategy. Are you aware of Healthy Building Network's home free product guidance? I don't know if that
but if you want to explain it to the
It's just like
audience.
a red to green spectrum. They take categories. They're not listing exact products, but they're saying in these categories, like for example, in flooring, if you're looking for resilient flooring, linoleum flooring,
Okay, sure.
flooring that's made from linseed oil,
Yes.
is much better than a vinyl flooring.
Than
So
a
that
vinyl
would
tile.
be,
Yep.
yeah, exactly.
If it's an
So
either
there's
or, take the green one. Yep.
yeah, and then some things are in the yellow phase, but if you can't find another alternative, yellow is
Yellow
good.
is still better than red. Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
there's these good product guidance, like these spectrums. And I think, while we're still waiting for the market to completely change,
Yes.
these are really great strategies.
And when they're looking at human health, is it similar aspects that your lab also takes into account? So it's not just health, it's also carbon and waste and equity.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. They're looking at all those issues. But I think generally that product guidance is looking at the exposure.
Okay, the exposure itself. Got
The
it.
exposure phase. These are like first steps.
Yes.
Like what are the first steps to getting to healthier buildings? And these are really good strategies. Like sometimes it's about swapping out a material, like we've been
Right.
talking about.
Yeah. We're not necessarily saying you need to have your whole building be naturally derived, but just if you have the choice between two types of gypsum and one is cradle to cradle certified and green label plus and the other isn't, like let's make the better choice and have the ones that are verified to be healthier and, have more environmentally preferable standards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to know that third-party certification is really important and that it's not like an industry association
Right.
certification. And to know the difference between those is a really important step too.
That's
to
a great
say,
point.
okay, Cradle to Cradle is a really trusted certification. You know that. You can put it on, we sometimes have these little cards people can take, just put this on your desk and know that these 5 resources are really good. They're
Yes.
trusted.
They're trusted, yes. Right.
And if it's not on there, then you be skeptical about it, and so that's definitely bottom line. I would say, then the healthiest choice for insulation, if we go back to that,
yes,
is
please.
we go back to natural and mineral-based insulations. We can, again, look to history, look to the way we did it, but straw bale,
Horsehair.
and yeah, exactly. But straw bale is
Yeah.
taking on a new industry.
Yeah.
It's becoming mass. They're trying to make precast panels. There's also hemp lime, which is starting to take hold in the United States as a wall insulation
Okay.
that can be either precast or can sprayed in. And the ingredients in these are really simple. It's like a plant and a mineral and a little bit of water. 3 ingredients. So and they're all regenerative.
Yeah.
And many of them, the hemp plant captures sequesters carbon while it grows.
Yes.
It's just another superfood. So is it cost competitive? Is it super available? Not yet.
Right.
But I have every reason to believe that it will be soon.
Well, and also that ties back pretty well into just what we've been talking about in general. 5 years ago, the industry wasn't where it is today, right? HPDs, EPDs, all of these labelings weren't nearly as prolific as they are now. So that's not to say that these products that you've listed, right, the hemp lime and the straw bale materials won't be in a few years, right? The industries are continually trying to be innovative, but also we as consumers have a lot of power. We as specifiers have a lot of power to get the manufacturers to do the right thing. If we
Exactly.
stop buying XPS in general because it's terrible for your health and it's terrible for its global warming potential, then hopefully the building industry, right, the manufacturing industry will just stop producing that material in that way.
Exactly. I mean, I think about so many resources, so much money goes into research and,
Yes.
in about really research evaluation and development and new technologies. Why don't these big companies do the same kind of research and development with some of these natural ingredients? If that amount of money went in, if we poured the billions of dollars that go into R&D for the petrochemical industry,
right, yes.
instead we put them into agriculturally based products, plant, we would be in a great spot in a few years.
Yes, right. The innovations that could come out of that, right? Yep.
Yeah. So there's so much potential.
So much potential. Yeah. So as we wrap, I do just want to ask you one last question. Again, we kind of just talked about 5-year look back. one question we like to ask on all of our episodes is if we have you back on the podcast 5 years from now, what do you hope we're talking about? Or where do you hope maybe the industry has moved?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we're talking about a shift in the industry to healthier buildings entirely, from throughout the life cycle. So we're talking about that. Wow, isn't it amazing how the last 5 years has shifted completely? That we might also say that the incidence of asthma in children has declined because of these new, healthier buildings.
Yeah.
Maybe even other diseases in children and other people have started to go down instead of up. Maybe even the life expectancy is going up instead of down. Maybe there are many of these new effective regenerative materials on the market, like we just talked about, that they're now, all this $5 billion has gone into understand how agriculture can make the newest insulation, and that they sequester carbon in the meantime. And actually that our global warming potential has gone down.
Wouldn't that be great?
Maybe there's many more kelp forests in the ocean that are being farmed to be the new ingredients for the next adhesives or next foams. Wouldn't that be awesome? Anyway, so I think that's what's, in 5 years we look back. And, and that, of course, designers and architects are just obviously specifying less toxic, non-plastic based products. So I think, that's a big thing. But, a small thing might be that there's an increased awareness that just we can associate a disease with exposure to the environment and not just to genetics, for example. That's just an understanding. We just know, there's an exposure that's related to a condition we're having. That correlation is more common sense than new information. Because then that kind of understanding will change everyone's decision making.
That's excellent. Let's hope, right? Here's to hoping. But also, here's to all the work that we do, right? Looking back on the progress that's been made already in the industry and educating our colleagues and our counterparts, right, across the industry. That's step one, right? Just educating and then influencing, right? And then influencing how products are both manufactured and specified. And then the research, I kind of feel, is kind of the fourth part, right, of showing how those better manufactured or keeping all of these aspects in mind will influence positively people's health. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, really excellent conversation today, Jonsara. So happy that you could join us on this podcast episode. And yeah, thanks so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Sarah. Likewise, it was great speaking with you. I feel like we could keep this banter going for a long time. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing to really make a difference.
Yes, you guys as well. So again, we'll link all of the resources for the lab and a lot of the great things that you've referenced today in the show notes for all of our listeners.
Great. Cool.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Buildings and Beyond. Buildings and Beyond is produced by Stephen Winter Associates. We make buildings better. Learn more at swinter.com. Special thanks to Sarah for guest hosting and our guest Jonsara. Also, shout out to the Buildings and Beyond production team: Rob Aldrich, Kelly Westby, Heather Breslin, Ian Slackus, and Trisha Carr. See you next time on Buildings and Beyond.